Welcome to But Is It Feminist, the podcast that supports women's rights and women's wrongs. I am your host, Amanda Hernandez, sociologist by training, hater by nature. Today, we are going meta, not Facebook, just big picture. We are going big picture. I joked around a little bit in my very first episode, season 1, episode 1, that podcasting was for the bros. And I think for better or worse, the podcast is a place where literally anyone can say anything they want. And often it is men who have the audacity. There are so many manosphere type influencers, alpha male podcasters out there. And often it can feel like podcasting really is for the bros, especially when that shock jock edgelord content gets a lot of visibility because it's shocking. As listeners of this show know, and if you are new here, you will learn that this is not a high visibility platform. As of this morning, I have 109 Instagram followers, but I'm working to elevate the voices of folks who are thinking alongside me about feminism and the ways that it manifests in all of our lives. And often this is through the lens of pop culture. So things like movies, music, reality TV, on, and the podcast. So again, today we're going meta and we're asking, can the podcast as a medium be feminist in a world where often it is not? And as always, I have solicited the help of someone whose work focuses here to help us think through it. And today that is Dr. Adrienne Trier-Bieniek. Adrienne has so much incredible and relevant work for us. So I'm just going to list the highlights, but there is a lot that you should absolutely check out on her website, which is linked in the show notes. Adrienne has edited several essay collections on popular culture, including The Beyonce Effect, essays on sexuality, race, and feminism, and feminist theory and pop culture. She is also the host of her podcast, of course, called Most Popular, the Podcast, which she created for her sociology students, and the author of the article, Podcasting as Feminist Pedagogy, an Intersectional Approach. Additionally, she has a new collection coming out this year called In the Swiftie Era, and has an open call for books on gender and pop music with McFarland Press. Adrienne, I am so happy you have accepted my invitation, and I'd love it if you could introduce yourself a bit more, and maybe will you tell us about In the Swiftie Era too?
That was such a nice introduction. I never know how to fix my face when people are saying nice things about me.
I understand. You have a beautiful smile right now, so you're smiling.
Thank you. So hi, I am Dr. Adrienne Trier-Bieniek. I am a professor of sociology at Valencia College, which is in Orlando. I consider myself to be a interdisciplinary scholar. So I'm a sociologist, like my PhD is sociology, but I find myself most comfortable in the interdisciplinary realm. So I study gender, I study pop music, I study pop culture. My longtime kind of obsession with pop music is what led me to this point, right?
Yeah.
Like I was the kid dancing to Paula Abdul back in the day and Janet Jackson. So I am specifically interested in what fans take away from music. So what they get from listening to artists, and specifically for a long time, and in the Swiftie era is kind of revisiting this. I looked at how people use music as a way to recover after trauma. So not just like in the immediate kind of instance of trauma, but years later, like a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, like the long-term stuff. So I consider myself to be a public scholar. Since you mentioned my podcast, I consider myself very much to be a public scholar, that I am interested, and I very strongly feel that scholarship should be something that anybody should be able to understand and pick up, and that you should have a very baseline understanding of scholarship, and you should have a very baseline understanding of what you're trying to tell people. So that's kind of like, I know we're going to talk about the origins of the podcast, but where that came from. In the Swiftie era it's actually going to be, I think, summer or fall of 26.
Okay.
When it comes out. But it's quite possibly my favorite book that I've edited to date. Like it's got people from all different disciplines. I've got I've got, sociologists. I've got obviously like pop culture scholars. I've also got economists, people in business school. One guy is an engineer. I can't even tell you what type of engineering he does.
That is so cool.
But yeah, he does. He's STEM, right? I've got I've got people from countries outside of the U.S., which is always important when you do an edited collection.
Yeah.
And it's going to cover a lot of different things. It's my section looks at, again, fandom and the connection with trauma and the relationships Swifties build with each other online. And then there's some discussion of things like merch sales and how people create their own merch. And a couple of women wrote really great essays about how Taylor Swift's music helped them talk with their children and help them be better parents. So yeah, it's kind of all over the place, but it's probably one of my favorite collections I've done.
That's so exciting. And that's a high bar because I loved the Beyonce Effect. That was such a great collection. Okay. So I always start off with the same 2 questions for everyone. I would love it if you could tell me how you define feminism and how did you come to think of yourself as a feminist?
I define feminism as essentially equality. The holdup for me when I define it is that I think it has taken on so many different. I think it's taken on so many different images, attitudes, like the way people think about feminism. I think the essential part of it is that it is assuming that it is saying that people are equal, right? That kind of like the thing you hear people say a lot, that it doesn't mean I want more, it doesn't mean I want less, it just means I want the same opportunity as anyone else. And it's kind of I know it gets attributed to Ruth Bader Ginsburg a lot, and I'm forgetting the name of the woman who it comes from, but the idea that I just don't want your foot on my neck, right? Like I just want to be able to have opportunity without having the obstacle in front of me. But what I think that sort of, when we make it that distilled down, we tend to forget that me, a white, educated woman, can say that, and I don't have the same obstacles as like women of color or queer folks, right? So it's hard to define it in just one certain way for me, because I know that simple definition sounds great for me, but that may not, that comes with so many other loaded things for other folks to consider. I don't know that I have ever not been this way.
Everyone always treats it like it's not an illness, but people often frame it that way of like, this has just always been my burden.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, part of it is I had parents who were social workers, and my parents went to college in the 60s and 70s. My dad fought in Vietnam and then went to school afterwards, and he ended up working with children for his whole life. So he worked with kids who were abused and neglected, and that came from being in the war and seeing kids being mistreated. And my mom worked with the elderly, so she saw people through the end of their life, right?
Yeah.
So I think already having that in my house, like 2 parents who were not going to let me not share an emotion and gave me decisions constantly, and they didn't have a ton because they were social workers, right? So like money wasn't something that was constant in our house, but whatever they had or whatever time off they had, they took me places to show me something other than this tiny town that I grew up in northern Michigan. So they really made it a point to be like, we're going to get you out of here. We're going to go to every national monument, every forest, everything that has a sign that says somebody historic did something here.
Yeah.
Right. And they would drive, because my mother's terrified of flying. So we would drive everywhere across the US, and that they really made it a point to do that. And I don't know how that could not have had an impression on me, right?
Yeah.
Like being a 6-year-old being toted to the Veterans Memorial in DC. And, we did that for several years in a row, I think, is kind of like a way for my dad to help with the trauma. So that was very rooted in me. And then I was a kid who loved to read. I loved the library. I loved mysteries. I loved any heroine doing anything. Yeah. I probably read it, right? Like, so I'm pretty sure it's baked into me. And then when I got to college and discovered that there was terms and words for these feelings I had, I was like, okay, there is some method to these feelings that I've been having,
Yeah. Do you recall, I don't know, like a class or a reading or something a professor said to you or anything like that made you go, ah, yes, I am a feminist?
No, it wasn't like a class or a reading, but it was this trio of women. So I still communicate with them. So Kathleen Underwood was a history professor in my undergrad. Judy Whips was a philosophy professor. I took a feminist philosophy class with her. This is it. I went to Grand Valley State University. I took a feminist philosophy class with her. And that was one of those moments where I was like, oh, there's terms for what I've been thinking. And then Kathleen taught a history class and a theory class that resonated with me. But kind of what really sort of put me in that lane solid was after I graduated, I worked at a women's center at the same university I graduated from. And the woman her name is Marlene Kowalski-Braun. She was like the director of the center, but she was also just like I see some potential in you and I'm going to teach you like how to connect this theory and these things you've been learning with actual activism. So having that was really important for me. I will also say the pop culture part of it was not lost on me because I grew up in the era of MTV. So like 90s MTV, like Queen Latifah, Tracy Chapman, Tori Amos, Sarah McLachlan, Alanis Morissette, like those just became almost biblical for me at that point. So, the pop culture side of me has been brewing for a long time. But again, until I got to college, I didn't know that I really had like a framework for it.
Yeah. It's so interesting to hear about the context that people develop a quote feminist consciousness in, because it is always the intersection of, oh, I learned the words and I was able to see it in the things I love, see it in the places I inhabit.
Yeah.
So that's super cool.
Yeah. And I think when you're already drawn to that stuff and you find out that there's some sort of group or people out there or thought or book or whatever it is that kind of goes along with your worldview, that tends to be pretty life-changing.
Yeah, for sure.
What's kind of interesting for me is I got my PhD 15 years ago. I went to college 20 plus years ago. And the things that I talked about for the first 10 years of my career, 15 years of my career, are now things that I hear specifically students just like offhandedly discuss, right? Like I don't have to do a lot of work to get them to understand intersectionality because that's already something that has been permeated into them somehow. I'm assuming through social media and books and whatever the kind of media they're consuming. I also have a very diverse group of students. So I already have people who are very aware of things like intersectionality. But I have noticed that there's more of a lean toward these words aren't as foreign as they would have been even a decade ago. And I think that's great. Like, I don't have to explain gender identity as much anymore. People tend to already know what that means, right? Or like what a binary is, like that tends to be already baked in. And I think that's awesome. That shows that the people who went to college a couple of decades ago are teaching kids this stuff.
I really like that perspective. And that's a good perspective, I think, that I need to take on, because sometimes what I end up feeling, especially when I teach like an intro section, is I'll say something like, okay, you probably heard this word on TikTok, but you're all using it wrong. And I'll be like, we're going to read the primary source material. But you're so right. Like the fact that they're even engaging with it before they're in the classroom is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Question. So a question I think about a lot is sort of like what I teased at in the introduction, which is, why is it that the podcast has gotten this reputation as being a masculine space? I listen to a lot of different podcasts that are written and hosted by women, people of color, queer folks, and I've sort of read the podcast space as somewhere where people can reclaim their authority, especially when we live in a society that tries to strip authority or expertise away from essentially anyone who's not a straight white man. So how is it that podcasts do offer this space for people to reclaim authority while simultaneously having this reputation of the alpha male bro space?
I think what you're describing was the origin of podcasting. I think that when you look at the beginnings of it, it wasn't set up to be kind of this hyper produced, like, you know, really overly done type of thing, right? It was supposed to be, I have a microphone on my computer. It's probably pretty crappy, but I have it. I have something to say and I know how to make an RSS feed, right? Like that was really just the origin of it. Even when you look at like ones that became super popular, like Mark Maron is a good example, right? Like he had this podcast that came out 16 years ago. He was doing it out of his garage. And of course, he was interviewing famous people because he himself had celebrity adjacent friends, but it was very grainy. And it wasn't like the hyper production that you see now, right? Like I'm talking to you on a fancy microphone because I was told this is the best way to do podcasting. Yeah. But the origin of it really was people who had earbuds and a computer.
Yeah.
And we're like, this is how I want to communicate. It's kind of no different than like when you would hear about like bands in the 80s and 90s making mixtapes or like having like little demos that were they recorded using like a handheld recorder in a, you know, space somewhere. I think what you're describing is the origin. It was supposed to be this thing where anybody who had a thought could post it.
Yeah.
And what happens a lot, right? With media. People started to figure out how much money could be made, ad sales, production companies.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
You know, the consumerism of it, the capitalism of it. And when you do that, people who live on the margins tend to be even pushed further out onto the margins. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the bro space, I think, started to break through more because those are the voices we're used to hearing. Those are the authoritative spaces we're used to getting information from. And those were the people that were easily bringing in the money that these companies wanted to spend. And I don't even know if it was intentional. I think that's where the socialization of all of us has played in. But I mean, I listen to a lot of different types of podcasts, and I don't necessarily think that if there's a man hosting it, that he's aware that he's like taking up space that was supposed to, or that should have been for a marginalized group or something. I don't think it's that deep, but I do think that when you start to talk about how much money can be made, how much income can we draw off of this, how many ads can we sell, what conglomerate can come in and buy this and give somebody millions of dollars. Like, you know, Spotify is the one that gets critiqued the most, but there's like iHeart and Vox and a lot of them. How much can they buy these people for? And in turn, you're getting these ultra produced, sound really sharp podcasts, and people become used to that. So anything that's not in that space, our ears aren't trained for it anymore.
Wow. I'd never put two and two together on that. It's so funny because, as I mentioned before we started recording, I spent time this morning kind of reading some of your work, listening to some episodes of your podcast, and I went into Google, and like it in hindsight, I'm like, you're a dummy, Amanda. But I just typed into Google, most popular, the podcast. And of course, like I got the first things linked were like listicles, like the most popular podcast. And so I was like, well, what are the most popular podcasts? And so I start clicking them. And it's like a jump scare, right? Because it's just Joe Rogan's face. And I was like, okay, this is exactly what I was thinking about. This is also a good segue to your article, because you talk about this a little bit in the article as well, like the purchasing and the podcasting empires that are being built. So the article is titled "Podcasting as Feminist Pedagogy, an Intersectional Approach," published in 2023 in the journal, Radio Journal, International Studies in Broadcast and Audio Media. So can you tell us a little bit about the main argument you're making in that piece and how you're connecting it to taking these sorts of conversations and ideas in feminist scholarship to a broader audience?
Yeah, that journal was I was brought in as a guest editor to guest edit a podcast specific journal. I never know the lingo. Like, I know there's a specific way of saying it, but I was brought in as the guest editor for that edition of the journal. And so we had people who were talking about all sorts of stuff. I wanted to talk about why I created my podcast. So I called it Most Popular, kind of like making fun of listicles. Because I thought, oh, pop culture, but also most popular. Like, oh, mine will be the most popular podcast.
You were just what is it called? SEO hacking?
Yeah. But I teach at an institution that there's not a ton of funding for me to bring in outside people to come in and speak. And so I thought, well, if I want to have guest lectures in my class, I'm going to need to make it so that the students can access it at any point. And I was also thinking about it during the pandemic because like a few months before the pandemic happened, I started recording a few episodes. And then when the pandemic came, I was like, well, I have a lot of time now. So
just a girl and a mic and a dream.
Yeah. I mean, I was that person. So I started thinking, how can I bring in people who have expertise in areas that I don't, right? Teaching introductory sociology and social problems, you cover a lot of material and there's no way I'm an expert in all of it.
Yeah.
So I was like, who could I start talking to that knows more about this than I do? And I specifically wanted like experts in their field. So I did kind of what you said you did. At first, I just talked to my friends. So my first like 6 episodes were people I knew.
Yeah.
And then I started to realize that if you ask people to do this, they don't say no because everyone wants to talk about their research in some sort of like safe, supportive environment. And so I just made a list. And then I actually started asking the students, like, what would you want to know more about? What kind of topics would you like me to cover more? And they gave me some ideas. And from there, I just thought, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to make it so that they're going to listen to it in class as part of, they have an assignment that they complete with it. But also I made like learning guides for it. So they had like possible questions to consider while they were watching and alternative resources and just other things that could work well within just besides listening to the episodes. I couched it all in the pedagogy, Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and Bell Hooks's Teaching to Transgress, where both of them talk about bringing folks to the center who may not have had that opportunity.
Yeah.
My student population is also extremely diverse. And again, I'm very aware that I am a white lady. And so my experience is very different than theirs. And I wanted to bring people in that had experiences or had research or just had the knowledge that I didn't, so that they could be hearing from folks that had experiences like they did or could kind of speak more to that. So that was kind of the impetus for it.
Yeah.
And then once it got going, I realized very quickly that the students like it and that they, I thought for sure they would be like, whatever, like this is, this is just another thing. And they do tell me sometimes they listen to it on 2 times speed. And I'm like, that's fine. But the idea was really that you take people from the margins and you bring them into the center, and what kind of conversations can we have and what kind of gaps can I fill in this discipline that is so huge and vast that there's no possible way I'm going to be able to know all of it.
I think it's so interesting. Bell Hooks is specifically someone that I try and make a point to revisit her every summer, of like, okay, this is my 4-month break, in quotes around that, from being in the classroom. And so going back to Teaching to Transgress and her other volume, Teaching Critical Thinking, and using that as a way to kind of like give myself a loving hug and pep talk to go back into the classroom in the fall semester. And so it was just such a treat for me to see you explicitly linking the way that she thinks about teaching and reciprocity in the classroom, like in podcasting. I was just like, There's a lot of hearts in the margin while I was
Oh, I'm
reading.
so glad, because when I was writing it, I was thinking, this is such a stretch. No one's
Really?
gonna get this. Yeah.
It spoke directly to me. And
Okay, good.
like we were talking about before we started recording of what are my goals, what am I trying to do with this podcast? It seems for you, as you wrote and as you just articulated, your students were the first thought. Your students were the impetus.
Mhm.
And for me, admittedly, students were like a second thought. I was like, I want to have these conversations with people. I'm trying to think through them. I want to be writing about them. Oh, yeah. Also, my students could probably benefit from it too. And so I felt I didn't feel ashamed. I don't want to shame myself, but I was like, wow, this is such a beautiful connection. And even though for me, it didn't start in a place of, I want to gift this to my students, it definitely can be that.
I mean, even if it wasn't, this medium is meant to do exactly what you're describing, right? Like,
Yeah.
the idea is that you find people and you come up with topics and you find people who can speak on that, and everybody learns something. And I know podcasting isn't necessarily a learning, like, marketed medium, but so much of it is. And, part of it is whatever algorithm you get involved in. I understand that. Like, if you're just listening to people talking and commentary and all of that over and over again, maybe you're not learning a ton, but you do get some sort of door into people's lives and their experiences that you wouldn't normally get in another situation. And I think that's kind of the cool part about it, like, yeah, there's celebrities who have really popular podcasts and they talk about their movies and they talk about stuff that is so niche that it's hard to, kind of get invested in it. But there's also folks who are really good at doing like podcast documentaries, or who are really good at making a story out of this medium. That's kind of the nice thing about it, is the possibilities are pretty endless with what you can do with it.
Totally. Do you have a favorite podcast?
Depends on my mood.
Fair.
My favorite podcaster. Do you know who Kara Swisher is?
No.
So Kara Swisher is a tech reporter, and she has
Okay.
been doing it since tech was not even tech yet, like late 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And so she is very, very in depth. Like, she is waist deep in Silicon Valley. She knows all the people. She's extremely critical of all of them. And she has a podcast called Pivot, and then she's got another one called On with Kara Swisher. And I love listening to her because she is no nonsense. She does not do this to like make people feel amazing about themselves. She's very critical of people when they create products that are, techie, and she has tons of questions about it. And President Obama, I think, called her a pain in the ass at one point because she had so many questions.
What an endorsement.
Yeah. But I will listen to anything she puts out, because she is so smart and so intelligent, and just does not hesitate to tell people, you are completely full of it. This product you've created, or this thing you've done. One of the things she says to a lot of people in the tech industry is that the people who created social media didn't feel the need to put safety in it because they've never felt unsafe in their lives. And that has resonated with me so much every time I think about social media, the impact of our media, and even just things like news media or any place where you're getting your information. Those people have never really felt unsafe. So it's not been a big deal to not have security measures or privacy measures or things that can, protect anyone who's a part of it. Why comment sections need to be completely open all the time. Like, that to me that's changed the way I've thought about my my own like online presence.
Yeah. I mean, just listening to you talk about it, like immediately I'll be looking that up. I want to listen to the person who said that. That's like a voice I want to hear. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh yeah, of course. And then I like comedy podcasts. Like, I like Smartless. I think they're hilarious.
I've never heard that one either.
Oh, Smartless. It's Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes, and Will Arnett.
Okay.
And they are very funny. But that's my and Amy Poehler's comedy podcast is amazing too.
Okay.
My fun ones.
I think the ones I listen, so my podcast diet is very I got a lot of junk, which is, I think, ironic considering my favorite one is called Maintenance Phase with
Oh yeah, I love Maintenance Phase.
anything that Michael Hobbs is on. So then, of course, If Books Could Kill, and then the one that I feel like ashamed for enjoying, my guilty pleasure. I love a podcast that's called Crime Junkie.
Oh yeah, a friend of mine a few years ago did a paper on true crime podcasting. Yeah,
Okay,
she did it at a conference. I don't remember what it was called or what conference it was, but it was Crime Junkie. Oh, hold on, my dog has just arrived.
Hello, pup.
This is Winston. Okay, go lay down. Go lay down. Yeah, she did this paper on that. My husband is insanely into all of those true crime podcasts. Like, he loves all of them.
Yeah. I had at a conference last year, went to a session where someone presented on true crime, and we had emailed back and forth because I wanted to have this conversation about the true crime genre, and I probably need to follow up with them.
It's a fascinating genre. I mean, it's massive. It's massive.
Yeah.
How many true crime podcasts are out there, and like how many people have. The thing that I think that's interesting about true crime is you get that range I was talking about, right? Like, you get the very produced, very like structured episodes, and then you get the people who are like, I just want to talk about this thing that happened and with my friend and put it out on the internet for people to hear our thoughts.
Yeah, so many podcasts. Okay. Do you have anything that you view as a limitation of feminist podcasting? So is there something that you wish the podcast could do, but it can't?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know if this is feminist or not, but I wish there was a way to break through, like I said, the overly produced, overly corporate structure wall, right? Like, it's like we have another glass ceiling, but it's that.
The podcast glass ceiling.
Like, I wrote about this in the paper that the pandemic really changed podcasting because so many people were home and listening to things. And I think that's when financially things started to grow for podcast companies. And that's great. But I wish there was a little bit more of an avenue for people who didn't have corporate sponsorship to have a space.
Yeah. And I think that leads well to the last question I have for you, which is usually at the end of these conversations, I'm like, okay, our big question is, but is it feminist? And I think your record screams yes. Like, you literally have published about saying, yes, it can, and it is. So rather than spending time having the conversation, which is usually some flavor of like, well, this thing can be feminist in these contexts, and sometimes it's not. I want to push our conversation just a little bit beyond that, which is, what kind of future do you imagine when people have access to podcasts and other forms of like public scholarship that invite everybody to these conversations? And when I'm thinking about access, I'm thinking both in terms of like being able to listen and having a mic and a dream and like creating their own.
I don't know that it's the future. I think we might already be there.
The future is now.
Yeah. I think I stand by what I said. I hope there's a way for, let me rethink about this.
Yeah.
It would be nice if there was a way for it to, for both. I don't know if you can hear my puppy. My husband is on the other side of the door telling her, go away.
It is okay. You will not be the first person on here where there's just like animal mayhem audible in the background.
Because I feel like I feel like we're already there, right? But what I do hope happens is, number one, in like okay, let me say it like this. When I record my podcast, I record like we're doing right now, right? But I don't keep the video. I just use the audio. I don't put it up on YouTube other than the audio. I don't do the video. I don't do any of that stuff because I feel like this conversation is great, but I don't want you and I to be tossed up onto YouTube and for people to invite the trolls and the, like,
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
I do.
And I feel like if we're talking about a utopia, that would no longer be an issue, that we would just let smart people have conversations and we wouldn't focus on what they look like, or if they're being perfect in the way they present something, or if their audio is fantastic, or, I very much think it would be great if we could return to a situation where this is a person with a microphone and we will let them have these conversations.
I hear you. I love that too. So recently, my husband started working part-time at a podcast studio, and he had asked me, he started like right at the end of it was like right when I finished recording the first season. So he says to me, do you want to come into the studio? And when I decided I was going to do the second season, do you want to come into the studio and record? Like, we could do video, I was like, oh, hell no. I was like, thank you for the offer, but I have the mic I checked out from the university library, because I had some of those same concerns of like, I know that a lot of people are using video podcasts, and like, when I open Spotify and I go to listen, Spotify recommends video podcasts to me now.
Right.
And for me, it felt, and maybe this is wrong, and I can see that other people would have different interpretations, but for me, it felt almost antithetical to a feminist podcast to also have a video element of it, because of the reasons you described of like, I've already gotten weird comments on TikTok when I've talked about the podcast. And so I was like, I don't want the people that I'm inviting or myself, like, you're already how do I want to phrase this? You're already inviting yourself to like hyper scrutiny by having these types of conversations. Yes. Why would I want to add the element of like, and you can make fun of how we look or our backgrounds or our cats or whatever, right? Like, I don't know. So that's interesting that you highlight that element.
Yeah, it seems like if we're talking about the gendered nature of everything too, right? Like that's kind of the number one thing that keeps people who don't fit a certain image. And I'm not even just saying like attractiveness. I'm saying like you said, like, this is my home office. There will be no fancy background. There will be no green screen. There's no ring light. Like, this is literally just me sitting in my home office, right? And just the fact that you have to think about that before you say what you think about something that is important or deep or whatever, that's insane.
Yeah.
And it would be great if that was no longer a factor,
And it, admittedly, when he had posed it, I was like, you know what? I love what I do, but I don't care enough to blow dry my hair. Like, I will not be doing that.
Yes, and exactly. Or, I can exist in this space without appealing to you. That is okay as well,
Yeah, I did, before I logged on to record, was, getting ready, making sure I had my notes, my beverages. And I was like, the lighting in the bedroom. So even though I know I'm not going to keep the video, I was like, the lighting's horrible. I'm going to come to the kitchen. And I like shifted the table in the kitchen so I could get the good light. I was like, I don't want her to think I don't have good lighting. Well, Adrienne, thank you so much. This was such a thoughtful conversation. I really appreciate your time, of course, but also your insights and just the way that both through your written work and what you've shared have pushed me to think more about the potential of this medium. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. I love talking about this stuff. So.
Well, you did say, right, like if you email the person to be on your podcast, they're probably not going to say no because they want to talk about it too.
Yeah, it's very true. It's very true. Thank you for having me.
Of course.